Thank you very much. I'm very excited and humbled to stand in front of all of you, but also a little bit scared for you, because when I asked Sarah that how long should I speak, and you know she's an African woman herself, and she says, as long as you can take. Like, Sarah, I have mercy on the people that are in our audience. So hopefully you came prepared for when the evening gets chilly, that you may have some blankets around. Because we love to talk. It is the power of stories, and many of you are here today because of the very power of stories. Really knowing that the issue that we are trying to look at is HIV and AIDS. I do not claim to be a learned person myself. I'm always humbled when I have this privilege to speak in front of learned people. You know, actually, maybe it's because you realize that you have almost nothing to offer. But once you use your gifts in a small way, you find that the Lord multiplies what you become faithful with. So I've been humbled and challenged in a lot of ways to speak to many people who are much learned than I am. But I've also been privileged, I would say, to share my story. It's also a scary thing because, you know, when I speak and my daughters are there, I've got 2 biological daughters. I've adopted 4 children. So I'm a mother of 6. Hopefully there'll be 1 more and I'm done, I think. The most scared time, it wasn't even meeting people like President Bush, speaking to him in his Oval Office eye to eye. It is when I speak in front of my children. Because, you know, whenever everyone gives me a standing ovation, they are still wondering, what is wrong with these people? Why are they standing up for her? You know, I remember I had girls, you need to get up, you know. But it's because to them, you are just an ordinary person. So imagine what you are being represented to. Not even my own children can hear me. But you have me today, so I'm excited. The issue of HIV and AIDS, I think it is a global issue, and many of us do know that. It is an issue that deserves each one of us to personalize it. This has been our theme, something that I've run with so strongly and so convinced since 1997, when I just learned about HIV and AIDS. It's something that I've always been convinced that until we move from the statistics and realize that HIV and AIDS has the human stories. They have faces. They are stories of men and women who have this epidemic. Then we'll be able to say, what can we do? And I think for some years, it was more about the numbers. It was more about, those who already have AIDS. We're even forgetting those who are living very healthy for some years with HIV. So how did my story get in touch with HIV? Very young in a way, but I also don't want to claim that I was younger, because I have heard stories of people who are even younger than me. You're talking of young people at the age of 9, age of 8. And I'm sure some of them, they are born and then they never have a day to see their mother because their mother immediately dies. That's what HIV and AIDS has done, in particular with AIDS. So my story is not unique in many ways, but also unique in some sense, that I have had the opportunity and the privilege that many other young people and women would never have in my continent or even country of Zambia. So my parents began to experience this disease that they didn't know what the disease was. It wasn't long. My baby sister died of that disease, and we didn't know what was happening in our family. And eventually my father, who was the bread winner for the family, and of course my mom worked as well alongside him, he was not able to make the decisions that he used to make. And that was the beginning of the real effect on HIV and AIDS on us as at an household level. From there, we lost all the income that my father had, and we were forced to go to the village. I remember very strongly how different it was, you know, coming from a house which had electricity, running water, and then to be woken up, I don't know, maybe it was 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Princess, wake up, wake up. I thought I was dreaming. But alas, that had become my reality. It was time to wake up, to go and fetch water so many miles before I could walk back again and go to school and walk several miles. And of course, my parents continued to deteriorate until one night I had come back from school and my mother called me and said, "Princess, I want to talk to you." And she looked in my eyes and said, "I want you to be strong and to be of good courage because I'm going to die." And that's what she said, "I'm going to die." And there was no preparation per se, and that was the best she could do in her time. And being a child, especially when you're brought up in family African setting, you didn't have the ability to question why or what's happening. You just said, okay. I knew what death meant to some extent, and it didn't take long. My mother, who was a very strong woman, there she was in her bed lying, almost waiting her death. There are a few stories that I will jump, but there are also a few stories that I will highlight. One of those that I like to highlight is how even basic things in countries like the US, or let's just say in the West in general, you have the ability to have access to very basic things, while in Africa those things can be very life-saving. For many of you are from there, or you have visited there, excuse me, excuse me, you'll find that even basic things like antifungal cream, they're not accessible. Now, this was 1997 when my mother needed an antifungal cream to alleviate her fungal infection. In this rural clinic where we were, it wasn't anywhere near to be found until we traveled 5 hours from where we were. So we went right to the town that borders with Congo. And me and my cousin, I remember doing about 5 hours on one way, and then coming back another 5 hours. And we heard people crying. My mother was dead. That is the reality for many people who live with HIV and AIDS in Africa. Even today, as we look at the 33 million people that live with HIV and AIDS, the truth is the numbers of those who have access to treatment has increased in a lot of ways. And many thanks to many of you who are advocates, different organizations, and yet also many thanks to the leadership that has awakened to show the leadership in terms of the fight of HIV and AIDS, especially the political will. And with that, we cannot forget to talk about the PEPFAR fund, which was about $15 billion, and hopefully it will be $50 billion today. And many other countries have continued to show some leadership in that area. But there's so much to be done. You'll be surprised today that not only Zambia, but many other countries, the second way of transmission is still mother-to-child transmission. Children on a daily basis, they are still being infected with HIV and AIDS because their parents cannot afford a single dose, which costs in some countries maybe $4 or $5. They cannot afford that, and they pass the infection to their children. Yet the success has been recorded and continue to be shown that in developed countries, those prevalence rate or the infection rate from mother to child has dropped to nearly less than 2%. Why can't we demand the same for those in developing countries? Why? And I think the question and the answer lie in each one of us. My mother died not having access to that drug. And we thought that was the end. We thought, okay, at least she's gone. Maybe we have our father. But within a short period of time, few months, my father became very sick. We had no time to even think of what had befallen us already. In his situation, it was even harder because now all of the resources were gone. Again, just few things that I like to pick up from my father's story. There's so many things I can share with you. There's so many hardships that happen. Of course, the income is gone. The protection on the children and the entire family is gone. Not only the family, what happens in the family affects the whole community, and the whole nation is at stake. Today, it is no longer news to hear the absence of teachers continue to increase. The absence of those who work in the health sector. The effect on the agriculture sector. That is what HIV and AIDS is doing. But even more than that, it is breaking the very backbone, the very fabric of Africa, which is the extended family and the family itself. I remember the few times, and you know, sometimes even when I tell this story, it almost like it's so, I don't want to say it's so surreal, because it did happen, but it almost feels like that. It almost feels like that's not my story. And there's the part of me, I think, that wants to wish that wasn't part of my story, but it will forever be my story. It is the days that I would carry my father on my back because he had lost so much weight. And I'd carry him to a clinic, which I didn't even know how many miles I was carrying him for. And in many cases, all he was given was Panadol. And say, well, we'll see you again. Or we wish you well. And we had to come back again. I'll never forget the image of my father's legs reaching the ground. Because he was tall, maybe 6 foot something. I don't know. We never had the chance to know per se. But it was one of those painful moments. And I think there's no reason why children have to be, what is the word? Grabbed from their childhood. Their childhood is being grabbed every day because of HIV. They are forced to do things that only adults should do. There's no joy in being children anymore because of HIV and AIDS. But yet, with each one of us saying, what can I do in my own way? Maybe in a little way. But I will tell you that there's no little way in making a difference. There's no small effort. Because it can be life-saving. Even just sharing can bring hope to someone. And that is the power that we have and the opportunity as we look at HIV and AIDS. My father eventually died. And of course, even the agony to be the head of the house became even more enormous. So it isn't not just those that live with HIV and AIDS. It is the burden that is left on the children in particular. Today we are talking of 15 million children that have been orphaned due to HIV and AIDS. And of course, you know that 12 million of those are in sub-Saharan Africa. When we look at the infection rates, again, over 70% of those infections are in Africa. And I think in some statistics would tell you 50% or 60% are women. These women are not just being hit by HIV. These women have lagged behind for so many years. They have been the least to be educated. They have been the least to have a voice in many of these communities. And here we are. They are the faces of HIV and AIDS. And you cannot be introduced to the world of women without being introduced to the world of children. They are so connected. I've always asked a question. In my country in particular, and many other countries in Africa, when I travel, I say, even as much as the women are victims and have felt the impact, but the women have become the leaders in their own rights. On every bedside that you go to, who do you find? In many cases, it is a woman. It is an aunt. It is a grandmother who doesn't know what has befallen her when all her 5 or 6 children are dying, and she'll be the one to take care of 20 grandchildren. What care will she give? But that's what HIV and AIDS is doing. It is forcing those who should be resting to become mothers and parents over again. The grandparents are being seen to become parents again. It is forcing children to become the one to head the households. And in many cases, with little or no income at all, as it was in my own situation, where the means of survival becomes, what do you do when you don't have food? And here I am with this big responsibility of taking care of 8 other lives. So 9 of us together. As many young girls, story goes, in countries like Zambia, Kenya, Uganda, Botswana, and of course where conflict has happened, wars, it is even more multiplied. The effect, I think the impact on the communities and families can, I don't know, I can't even explain myself because Zambia is one of those few peaceful countries. But yet still, girls are forced to become young commercial sex workers. I even hate to use the word commercial sex worker, because what is commercial about making $2 a day with sleeping with someone? What is commercial about that? What is commercial about $4 because he didn't use a condom and then you risk your life to getting HIV? And I think there are many terms that we can look at and realize that they don't even hold the meaning if we can compare them to the life that is being taken every day. In a way, even though I ended up pregnant, I ended up dropping out of school, marrying a man much older than my years, twice my age. I was fortunate in some ways that he was even willing to keep me as a wife. Many of these girls will be chased away. They cannot even point that this is the man who gave me the child. And imagine the shame that comes with that. First of all, you have a child out of wedlock. And now you don't even know the father. And then suddenly you find out you are HIV positive. Who do you run to? Who do these people run to if our communities still keep stigma and discrimination as the welcoming sign? And it doesn't have to be written in words. It is the way you welcome someone. Many people with HIV know that they have an incurable disease. But all that they long for, we care for you. This is an issue happening in our time, and it is our call and our responsibility. And how we respond may differ from one individual to another, one organization to another. But there is nothing like one organization can do it alone. Yet each one of us coming together will make a great change. And when that question is asked to each one of us, what did you do? Because, Mommy, you were around when HIV and AIDS happened. Or grandmother, grandfather. What will be our response to each one of us? Little did I know that by getting married at that age, I ended up becoming infected myself. But I'll tell you, much more is not knowing my HIV status, that I was HIV positive as well. It was finding out that women in 1997 were not allowed to test without the permission of their husbands. How could it be? How could it be if these are the same women who are biologically vulnerable? How could it be if these are the same women who don't even have a say because they don't have an income of their own? Even banks can't lend them money because they have no land to show for. And when a husband dies, everything is grabbed away from them. I was determined to change that. And out of that, again, here I stand in front of you today. And for me, I was determined that even the few 6 months the doctor had said for me to leave in 1997, I wanted to use my voice. I didn't have the education. I didn't have any resources, but I had something. I had a voice. It didn't come easy. It was a challenge. I was excommunicated from church because I wanted to speak about HIV and AIDS. And people thought maybe I'm mad or something has happened, you know? But it is that sense of agency. And I think HIV and AIDS demand that sense of agency from each one of us. For how long will we say the numbers? For how long will we lighten up the candles and another World AIDS Day goes? For how long will we make commitments and not meet those commitments? And I think the world is ready, asking us for a chance and lead us not because of the promises they made, but the promises they made. That is what leadership should be judged on. That is what I will be judged on when my children look at me, that what kind of a mother did they have? Was she just a mother to us? Or she was a mother to many? Reading the authorized portrait of Mandela, I cannot hesitate to again reinforce the words of Ubuntu, which talks about to have a certain agency and that sense that looks beyond your own needs. that wants to see the other person's needs as much more important, maybe even your own, and to have the ability to feel the pain of someone else. When we hear of girls not being in school, those who are being taken advantage of sexually, not just in Africa, in Cambodia, and many other places. When we hear of war breaking out and realizing that it's usually the women and the children that are using as shields in many of those cases, our hearts should melt. Our pace should be increased, should accelerate. And people will see it, and they'll be attracted. They would want to know. They want to say, how can we do? It is with that I introduce you to how few of the many stories that I've enjoyed with World Vision, having worked in the community, from being a community worker myself, having been a caregiver, having volunteered with so many organizations like Oxfam, a few times passed along with care, the Peace Corps. I cannot afford not to tell a few stories like those of women like Teddy that I've met in the US, who when they heard the story, they said, Princess, we want to come to Zambia. And when they came to Zambia, the first thing they were greeted, it was as if it was almost planned. People were being taken to the place of rest, to the cemetery in wheelbarrows. When you hear these stories, you think they don't exist, but they are there. She was broken. Here she was, a woman, but she was broken. She came back. She married her friend. I think that time, it was just her and her husband, and they bought a lorry for that community, Zamtan. Again, she came back to Zambia. When she heard that the numbers of babies being born with HIV and AIDS are still high, she wanted to make a difference. Today, her and through her friends, they raised over 1.2 million. They built a clinic which has become a model for Zambia, even a model for the government. Here's one person who refused to be silent, who became a mouthpiece to her influence and her spheres and her networks, that this program has become a blessing to many children. Who knows who they'll become? What about schools like Wheaton, where they're only young in Chicago, and heard the story and said, we don't know much about AIDS, but we are willing. We are willing to go to places that we have never known. And of course, they were helped to come to Kakolo village, and there they fall in love with the story that there are young people like them who had dreams and goals, but they were not able to achieve them. Why? Because they didn't have access to education. And many of them died on the roadside as they tried to cross the road, because there's a highway. If you've been to Zambia, it's a very landlocked country. And so there are all these trucks passing back and forth. And these children were moved. Today they've built a middle school for this community. They've raised over 500,000. I've met people who have built a well. Someone just said, I'm going to sponsor a child, that's what I can do. But whatever it may be, big or small, it is that the fact that people realized they have a stake in this issue. That each one of us, we have a responsibility somehow. That as the numbers continue to increase in India, not even knowing what the numbers are in China, thank goodness there's the Olympics today going on, but the reality is the numbers of those living in China continue to increase. What about in East Asia, in East Europe, Russia, and today with what is happening in Russia and Georgia? All these things escalate what is already existing: poverty and HIV and AIDS. I can go on to talk about issues that are so related to HIV and AIDS. It is not a stand-alone issue. It's so intertwined with so many other issues. Poverty, water, lack of education, microfinance, lack of nutrition. All these are things that we can all go and talk about and dissect. But more than anything, my hope is that out of this, some of you are already on the ground working tirelessly, and some of you maybe even feel tired. How long should we go on? I hope that you'll be encouraged with my story. I get energized, of course, apart from the food that usually served at the events where I speak. It is the fact that I know that someone, even if it just means one person, who decide to make a difference. To me, that is worth the miles of a flight, and worth the energy, and worth the joy to celebrate that we are making a difference, and that there is hope in the midst of this hopeless situation. So God bless you, and thank you for coming today.
Don't go too far away. I'm sure there are questions that you would like to put, and before we conclude, let's have a little discussion and questions. So let's
and just people know this is my favorite part.
Good.
The Q&A.
Right. Absolutely. I think it takes a little time to digest what you've said and to think about it, and I'm sure everybody is trying to do that. One of the questions that perhaps you can answer, not really answer, but there are these huge amounts of money that are being talked about, whether it's from the Gates Foundation or through the US government, through the UN AIDS program, through Bill Gates's programs. How much difference are they really making? Are they succeeding in countries like Zambia, Botswana, South Africa, and other countries?
Yeah, that is a very... Do I still need to speak through the mic? Yeah? Okay. That is a very good question, and many times it comes out of a concern of even how good are the resources being used by many African governments. How well is the fact that these monies don't end up in government, other venues or even in pockets of people. And I think this is a big question which deserves answers from almost every leader, which we cannot even address. But I want to speak the glimpse of hope that I've seen is one of the initiatives that the African governments, and I think it's through the AIDS councils, have created, where many of these funds, Cedric, they are going through the national AIDS councils, which wasn't there when these funds started just to be released in the beginning. So every government did whatever they could do with these funds. And I think at that time, it was almost like they had this money which they never expected. And in many ways, I think some of them didn't even have the capacity, and the know-how on how to use these resources. So I'm so thankful to the AIDS councils, the national AIDS councils that have been put in place in many of these different countries, where they are now acting as bodies, either for monitoring and making sure that these funds are being used to the right people.
Is it government councils?
Yes, national AIDS councils are government. So that is one area. Then you have another entity where many of the governments, I'll give you an example of World Vision, for example. The US government has trusted or entrusted organizations like World Vision to be the one to disburse those funds in local countries. So when you talk of the PEPFAR fund, the ones who run that money in Zambia is World Vision. So because they know that World Vision has the capacity to track where the resources are going, they have the capacity to monitor everything and to evaluate what should be done and what shouldn't be done. I was just at Capitol Hill this December to report on the progress and what are some of the things that needs to be done, and also to advocate for more resources. So I would say that that has been another way some people and some governments are finding that by partnering with non-governmental organizations, they are more assured that their resources will reach the intended people. But also to add on, just to give a glimpse of what these resources can do, I think hope and change doesn't just have to happen with resources, even though resources are very key. I think it begins by even just education. It begins by just people saying we have a problem, acknowledging that there is a problem in their midst. But I'll tell you that in Zambia, when I learned my HIV status, the antiretroviral drugs costed nearly 3 million kwacha. At that time, a month, it was about 1,000 US dollars. Now tell me, how many people would afford if many people live on less than $1 or $2 a day? Today, because of the initiative of the PET Fund, many other agencies like the Global Fund, from 200,000 people who are on drugs, we have 10,000 people on drugs in Zambia. That's just one example. Now, of course, there is a goal that was meant, 3 by 3, many of you may know that, to reach, is it, what was that, 3 by 3 initiative. Does anyone know the 3 by 3 initiative in here? No? How many people from an NGO world here? Non-government organization? You don't know the 3 by 3 initiative? Oh, okay. Try and say it because I didn't refresh my mind. But anyway, it was a goal that was meant to meet. I won't try, but just look for the 3 by 3 initiative. It was a goal that was meant to reach people living with HIV to have access to treatment. Well, it hasn't been met per se, but the numbers have tremendously increased. So that is just a few things that I can highlight. And of course, there's still more things to be done and more resources.
Pharmaceutical companies cooperated more than in the beginning, and how many of these countries are now producing the drugs themselves? Is Zambia producing?
No, not Zambia. India, of course, is one of them. Is it Belgium? I think is one of them. Brazil, sorry, Brazil. And I heard something about Thailand. I haven't really heard how far they have gone, but I did hear something. Again, some of this patent rights ended. Some of you may even be more knowledgeable about this. It ended, so automatically many of these countries started to manufacture these drugs. But it took a lot of advocacy. It took a lot of advocacy. Many champions were like, where do we stop the profit and lives? And I think that those voices to speak to the big farmers needs to continue. That at the end of the day, where is the demarcation of that of profit and of that of the life of people at stake? And I think those discussions need to continue. Yes.
I read not too many years ago about the pharmaceutical companies being so generous they sent truckloads and trainloads and carloads of drugs to Africa. The only problem was they were out of date.
Yeah, they were expired.
Right.
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to make was if you take a progressive country like Zambia
Yes.
and Kenya, and let's say you go in there and eliminate or control AIDS, but with the transient people through Africa,
Yes.
it's just like that apartment building in Boston that's burning. They put the fire out here, transfers over there, they put it up there, transfers on back. And pretty soon it's all kaput.
Yeah.
It's all kaput. So you're spraying water on something and you feel good, but are you doing any good?
Yeah.
This has been the tragedy of Botswana, too.
Yes,
with a small
yes.
country on a transit route.
Yeah, it's the whole southern, not just Botswana, South Africa. It's the whole southern. I think if you usually when people Google my story, is the first story that comes out is how I used to hitchhike with the truck drivers, talk to them and come back. And I think organizations like World Vision, Society for Family Health, and many others, Parent PP Plan. What? Association, yeah? They have been working so tirelessly in those areas of border areas. So, first of all, let's clear the question of expired drugs. Again, this is something that many national AIDS councils are helping in because we used to have those drugs whereby they are expired and it's almost like a dumping ground. So, national AIDS councils, in conjunction with medical stores, like in countries like Zambia, they are trying to make sure that we do not have fake drugs. And that's also part of the concern of some of these generic drugs. How trustworthy are they going to be? Do they take away something? And those discussions continue. Now, when it comes to urbanization or migrating from South Africa looking for jobs to Botswana, and maybe for the people now in Zambia leaving because the copper has gone down, going to South Africa to the deep God and things like that. But that's why there's no one answer. You know, some organizations want to say, well, abstinence only. Well, how are you going to say abstinence only if someone has left work and all they are they're on the street for maybe 4 months, 5 months? To many of these people, it's not practical. And you may reach the girls themselves, or you may reach the truck drivers, but they have these girls who come to them. And I remember I used to go in nightclubs just trying to see what happens when young girls come in very sober and suddenly they're drunk, they're desperate. You see a shift, and these children don't even know what they are doing. So I think that is where there is no easy answer to HIV and AIDS, unfortunate. So no organization can claim, oh, abstinence only maybe would work, or condoms only, maybe those are the only things would work. I think it's informing people what is happening and what are some of the choices that are out there, so that out of that, they can make choices. But not just that. It is having programs like a program called the Sanduka Project in one of the areas in Zambia, where it's targeted specifically for young commercial workers, you know, or sex workers, I guess, to try and give them some microfinance, you know, initiatives so that they can be trained, they can have some resources, and then you can talk to them of leaving that trade. Otherwise, your words are empty if you can't help them to get out of what they're doing and provide for them. I think there was a hand here, or has that been clear?
One there, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you so much for speaking out tonight. I was getting a little tired. I was one of the tired ones today. I was recently in Kenya. I'm on the board of an NGO in Western Kenya. And I'm especially as a grandmother interested in mother-to-child transmission. And one of the things we found in our clinic is that you can talk about giving them a $4 drug, but if the mother is hungry and she has no food to feed her child, she will put the child back to their breast. And then the child is vulnerable and gets sick and dies. So one of the things they tell us, and it's all about poverty. Yes. Women are the face of poverty all over this planet. And it's really about poverty and education. You can't separate them.
Yes.
We bought this last time thousands of dollars worth of food supplements to give to the mothers who come to our clinic and who gave birth in the clinic the first year. And we gave them each a big recognition in the village because it was a huge thing not to have a baby in the village, you know, on the dirt floor. We also have a secondary school for girls, and it's grown from 140 to 300 girls in 1 year. And one of the now not in office parliament people, the MP from Nairobi, came to speak to the girls, and he was so proud of them because they had chosen to come to school, and he was point blank, and this was amazing to me. He was point blank about telling them not to have sex, to be careful of AIDS, that they are giving the opportunity of a lifetime in this school, and we're in the middle of nothing over in Western Kenya. And I thought to myself, yes, you're telling them like it is. And I was thinking to myself, gee, my congressman is Tom Price. He's a doctor. Could I see him going to a middle school and saying the same thing here in America? I don't think so, because I guess we're all here by virgin birth. I don't know. But the other thing was, I sat with the girls, like you're talking about shooting straight talk, and I just told them exactly that their lives were going to be fabulous with these educations. They want to be doctors and lawyers and TV reporters and all this. And I said, but not if you have sex. Without protection, because you will get pregnant, get AIDS, and die. And that, yes, they all just looked at me and they went, Mama. And I said, I'm only telling you like your grandmother. This is, if your grandmother was here, I'm telling you like it is. And they just looked at me, I said, because it's the truth. And all women want is the truth. And that's what you've been speaking, and that's why you're so well received, I think. And I just can't separate education from poverty and AIDS. It's like this big thing all messed up. And unfortunately, women are the ones who are paying the price.
Yeah. And I think that is the reason why empowering women is so critical. No matter how small it is, I would encourage each one of you, find a project. It could be World Vision. I think they have so many ways you can partner with that community. It could be any organization. Please feel free to find a community or a project that would empower women. You'll be surprised. Some of these decisions are made out of desperation. And once a woman knows she has an income of her own, the self-esteem that comes and the decision that she'll begin to make And those that her children will begin to make once they're educated will be so different from what it would have been if she didn't have the education. So again, empowerment also financially is very, very critical, I think. Yeah.
I had some that were already answered, so I'm going to ask another question. What was your, I was going to thank you very, very much for your heart talk here, heart-based talk. What was your most inspiring success you've had in the last year in this work?
Yeah. So if specifically in the year. Okay, good.
We'll repeat the question.
You want to repeat the question?
Or you
Okay. Oh, especially that they're recording. Actually, also the other thing I wanted to point out before I get to Rita, is the issue that, I would encourage all of you as individuals, as brothers and sisters and mothers and friends. I think it's very critical that you begin to raise awareness right here in the U.S. as well. Because I think there is a tendency to go overseas and speak to the people overseas. And you are leaving your own children vulnerable here. You are leaving your own young people vulnerable here, especially those in poor communities. Please become their voices. They need you. Look at the statistics in the U.S. alone. 40,000 new infections happen each year. And you cannot afford to look as if it's just an African problem. I encourage you. And if there are policies that limit that, you need to become the advocates in your own country. How can you claim to educate other people when you cannot do it in your own country? How can you? I can stand in front of you today because I started somewhere in my own country. And I continue to do that. And I think it's critical if America is going to lead, if you as individuals, if NGOs are going to lead, you need not to forget the young people in this country. They are lost, they're looking for direction. And so much misunderstanding comes when they hear people like me who have lived for so many years, people like Magic Johnson think, oh, the problem is gone. And yet AIDS continue to grow, even in this country. Sexually transmitted diseases. So if they are getting those diseases, what will stop them from getting HIV? So once again, let's not forget our own children in our own backyard. So coming to your issue again, with children I get. What was the question again? What was the most exciting moment this year? So this year, I'll hold on to that. I think one of the most exciting moments in 2008 has been of that I have completed my book. So look out for it. The website is princesszulu.com, so you can look out for it. We are yet to publish it. So if you know any editor, any publisher, please. So that has been exciting. But also, it has been this agency in young people. And it started, maybe I would say 2006, somewhere there. Young people have just become thirsty and hungry to do something. They are looking for ways to say, we want to make a difference. We don't want this to continue, not on our watch, that many people are dying in our age group, and we are doing nothing. They have gone on to change their majors in colleges. I've been to so many universities, you'll be so surprised. Maybe 50, someone needs to honor me as a doctor, just a honorary doctorate.
It's coming, don't worry. Unfortunately, we're not a degree granter.
This is what happens. I end up in such audiences. But
we may change that for you.
There we go. But I'm excited by young people. I'm very excited. They are demanding their faculty to include HIV and AIDS in their curriculum. I've been to Pepperdine University. I've been to Northwest. I've been to the most elite universities you can think of and to the most community-based colleges you can think of. And all of them, you see the agency, you see the voice. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for guidance. But they are tired of voices that are not doing anything. They are saying we are ready for change and action. And that's great for our generation and many things that are going to happen around HIV and AIDS. So that is exciting.
A couple more questions.
Yes.
And then
I wanted to ask you about which organizations really help with the microfinance, because I do think that's important.
Of course, I work for World Vision. I'll tell World Vision, But I have seen...
The question was, what organizations
Thank you,
help
Cedric.
with microfinance?
Let's do the partnership here. Thank you. World Vision. What can you add to that? But I want to say that the importance is that there will be different organizations that are going to do microfinance. What is important to understand is that what $1 cannot meet here, what $50 cannot meet here, goes a long way in a country like Zambia or Uganda or Rwanda. You'll be surprised how many women have revolved their micro-enterprise businesses out of maybe $100. We have so many testimonies at World Vision where women pay back the money nearly 96 or 98%? 98%. They all pay back. And many of these are women. Do I see Kate in here? Yeah? What is the proportion of women who? 68%. So again, the records are good, and these are women who are being given an opportunity that the traditional banks couldn't give them. And they are finding hope. They're finding this reason to believe they are someone. And it is the most exciting and most empowering way you can empower women. But not just give them money, train them. And that's one thing World Vision emphasizes on. If they're going to do pottery, let them be trained in that. If they're going to be sewing, invite an expertise to come and train them so that they can see the best of their results.
Director's care, I think Dr. Gale talked about microfinance too.
Yeah, we do have a program. It's called the Village Saving and Loan Program. And we do in many cases work with World Vision in the field. But obviously, we have about 1 million clients in Africa that do take advantage of the program. But microfinance is, I think, the single most important piece right now for women, especially, who, when you look at the traditional lives, as Prince Zulu has talked about, inheritance is a problem. So if you give them that little piece to take back home and borrow and pay back, it starts to empower them dramatically. So that's it.
As I understand, one of the major problems dealing with AIDS is a lot of misinformed leaders who disseminate information is totally incorrect with regard to the causes of AIDS. And I think one of the leaders, South African president, said it was a Western conspiracy, whatever. But I understand there are a number of leaders like that throughout Africa. And can there be anything done to educate and inform them? Because I think they have a very devastating impact on our population for disseminating this inaccurate information.
Yeah, again, the question is, what about the role of some of the misinformed leaders, or leaders that are not, for one reason or another, are making themselves informed, and the role that they may play? And I would like to broaden that and say, what is the role, the function of the government leadership in addressing this problem? Because I think that seems to be fundamental in setting the standard for the country.
Colleges and the schools and the universities and the students, how are they engaged? How are they being trained to go out and train others?
So I think we have two questions. One's the leadership, and then we'll ask the education question.
This is why I need a honorary degree. You see why. Well, I'll start with the first one, and I think Sarah here as well, she can even allude to that. Uganda has been such a good example. Many of you do know that. Sarah was just talking how you could add on when you have a chance. Is how Uganda, with its, again, it's so interrelated with the issue of how leaders make a great difference. Uganda, I think, served as a model and continue to serve as a model for Africa, where the infection rate, I think, was over 21. Is it 21 or even?
It's 25.
20, really? Oh, 25, yeah, over 25%. And they brought it to less than 5%? 5%. What it took?
But it's going back.
But going up again. And that's right. And also the war in northern Uganda. That's what war does again. So all these are issues that happen. But again, let's still see that Uganda did a good job, and if they continue or they get back to that track, they will serve as a good leader. That's what Zambia is doing now. We used to have an infection rate of 20%. It's coming to 16%. So I think the political will is critical. You know, no matter how you say Africa has democratic parties, but people still listen to leaders like, I don't know how to put, what is the best?
Opinion leaders.
Right.
Traditional leaders.
It's more like the leaders has much power on the people than the people have power on the leaders. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Without getting not into trouble. But that is the kind of democracy that is there.
Leaders to lead.
Yeah, there you go. It's like individuals look at leaders like, oh, they're going to lead us. It's not like, these are my people, I can hear from them. And that creates a challenge for many of these governments. And again, this brings us the issue of women. The more women are empowered, the more women are educated. And I think the more women are in leadership, we hope to see a change of this. Now, what are schools doing? I remember when I first started, I spoke at the University of Zambia. It's called CBU, which means it's in another region, but it's part of the University of Zambia. It was amazing how ignorant the people in the university were. Just amazing. This could have been 2000 maybe. You know, they just like, what are you talking about? This doesn't concern us. And I think organizations like CARE at that time, World Vision and many other local agencies, they saw a need to start to educate not only the students but the teachers themselves. So we started training them. Part of my job after I kind of elevated myself was to start to train teachers in colleges, in schools, and also to speak to students, not just as in a club, because we used to have these clubs. That's where you spoke to that group which came. But we said that's not an effective way. How can we find a way of integrating this education in all the other subjects? Because then they have no choice but to learn something in those subjects.
In the curriculum?
In the curriculum. And Zambia will report that is one of those few countries that has HIV and AIDS in the school curriculum from even as young as 4th grade. So that is good news, and we are seeing the model of anti-AIDS club not just be the only way, because in some ways it was even stigmatizing those who didn't come to the anti-AIDS club.
And do some of the students actually go out
Yes.
in the community?
Yes. Absolutely. And not just students in the community. One of my emphasis when I was a community worker with World Vision, it was how do we reach even those youths who are not in schools? Because you can meet this group here, which is in school. When school is over, they all meet at some point. So if you educate this and leave this other group, you are not doing something. So I think we had to find venues and ways of educating even those who are not in schools. Yeah.
But there's also another piece to that,
Yeah.
if I may add, in terms of the relationship between American universities and
Yes.
African universities. And Johns Hopkins, I think, is one of
Yeah.
the great schools that is working with Makerere University in Uganda
Yeah.
to try and sort of find a middle ground in terms of reciprocation of information going back and forth.
Yeah.
So there's that interrelationship.
Yeah.
Questions and then we'll... Yes.
Thank you once again for coming. If you go into a country with $15 billion and you are addressing a situation that the leaders from the top don't even want to admit is a problem, I'm just wondering, how does that
Absolutely.
actually work?
I mean, that's what I think one of the prerequisites the government has asked for, like the U.S., you know, how involved is the leaders? I remember even speaking, you know, we finished our meeting in 2003 with President Bush and the others who were there. And of course, being a Zambian, I wanted to do my country, you know, as a citizen. I was being a citizen, and I said, look, Mr. President, my country wants to let you know that we are moving forward, and the President Mwanawasa is trying to do everything in Zambia, and we would really appreciate your support. And I remember he looked in my face and said, Princess, thank you so much. We'll have to see that for us to even commit many other things. So I think the government, like the U.S., have done that in a lot of ways. They have done that. But also, I think there is a thin line that you have to walk. Let's say a government doesn't want to accept the problem, but you know there is a problem in that country. What do? Do you neglect the people, or do you find other ways of going through, like organization, like CARE or World Vision or many others within the country? Because at the end of the day, the people are the ones who are going to suffer. Some of those leaders, they even have access to treatment if they're sick, which many ordinary people do not have. So definitely it's critical that the leaders are involved, but also it's to find ways also of making sure that the community are not neglected.
How many of those leaders are interested in power more than helping their people?
Well, that's part of it, but it's so interesting, your comment, because your question for South Africa, because basically the programs in South Africa were forced on the government from the bottom, from the grassroots movement, where you had slogans in the township painted on the walls, sort of, you could call it graffiti, but it wasn't, you know, fighting AIDS. This started, and it forced the government to see that there was a problem. And it was the NGOs. So this was a case where the leader was in denial, and most of his cabinet forced the action.
Absolutely,
from the top up.
absolutely. Even in Zambia, I mean, I cannot tell. It's not just World Vision. There were areas where all the organization met together and just said, we are going after them. There was such a political paralysis. And today we are talking of these councils. It's something that we can say has been a progress out of these meetings. Yeah. And we need
I think okay, the last question, and then Siri.
My question, first of all, thank you so much for being an advocate, for speaking out, you know, not just for Africans, but for everybody that has this disease. My question is, being from Africa, and I'm from Africa too, but the cultural difficulty for women to speak out and, you know, be out there talking about these things. What were some of the challenges that you faced when you first decided to really be an advocate? And are there, knowing that this disease affects women more than men, how do you encourage more women to speak out?
Yeah, absolutely. Good points there. I think, I mean, there are many challenges that I face. You know, to every success, you know, there has been almost, I don't know, many challenges, especially for me at that time. My former husband was like, if you talk about it, you're divorced and they're going to the village. And that was a scary thing to know that if I did that, I'll lose the rights to my children, I'll lose the rights to be in the city, and I end up in the village as nobody. So it was a challenge, but I think one of the things that I saw important was that, you know what, if that's what it would take for my life, then fine. I'd rather live a life in the village with nothing than to be quiet. And I think each one of us has that power to be able to say, I'm going to strive and go beyond this. And we are seeing that with many women in the communities when they are trained, when they are taught that there is a power in your voice. Their husbands may chase them, or they may say, no, you can't have you. And in the end, they begin to see the light that this woman is bringing because of her commitment to accept her situation. Maybe she was almost dying, and now, because she has accepted her situation, now she's back to life. Doesn't that make more sense than to lose this woman? So I think that was part of the encouraging part. I knew what my challenges were. I think they say wisdom is knowing what is your weakness or your challenges. I think if I didn't know that I was going against being young, and I was only 20, 21, and I'm talking to not just the men, but also the women who are older than me. You know, so they're like, what are you talking about? Who are you to talk to us? You know, so there were all these challenges. But I think somehow by God's grace is to have this ability to tap into what they are doing. What is it that excites them? Where can you find these women? What are they doing? Are they at the under 5 clinic? What is their language? And then once you tap into that, and you have to create this relationship with them, and once they can trust you, of course they will question a lot of times, and in the end they begin to appreciate what you're saying. And for me, I used to do a radio program in Zambia that was supported by the UNICEF, and that really helped because many people heard me on radio, and they thought I was maybe 50, and when they came, this woman couldn't stop crying. I'm ashamed to even come for your counsel. I'm 55, and I was 26. You know, they pointed to her, this is Princess. She went somewhere else thinking they were wrong, you know. And again, they thought, But when you're looking for princess, that's princess, you know, and until she couldn't just control herself. But I would say that that's what AIDS is offering us, is that opportunity where even grassroots people can force leaders. I remember being on the radio where I spoke to the vice president of our country, and he said, "Who are you to talk to me?" I say, "I'm a woman," you know, and out of that became this paralysis being broken. So again, there are so many things that we have covered here, but I don't want you to forget the importance role of prevention of mother-to-child transmission. It's very critical, I think, in our time. There should be no reason why children should still be getting infected from their parents. Again, it's very important that women empowerment, microfinance, again, be highlighted whichever way you may want to venture into that. I would encourage you that. Water, something we take for granted here, yet in so many countries it is life-saving. And imagine if your immune system is already compromised and you need clean water, what a difference it makes. The nutrition that comes with a community that has been empowered or come alongside, where they can now grow groundnuts, a garden, and some women are starting poultry farms and piggeries. Whatever sells in their area can never be undermined. So I hope that these are some of the issues that you look at and say, how can I make a difference? So once again, thank you.